David Edward and Lynn Robinson discuss Lynn's book, Divine Intuition.
Lynn, how are you?
I am good. Nice to be here.
Yeah, isn't that? See, I hit record and then I jump on you and you get and it starts asking you questions and stuff, right?
I know. I have to be on here.
I didn't even know it did that. This one finally told me. I'm like, oh man, I'm sorry. I've been doing this to people for like 50 episodes. So Lynn, you have written a series of books, but the books are a byproduct of your business and social stardom that you accidentally achieved.
Yes.
Right. By doing intuition readings and that kind of stuff. So,
Yes.
I'm going to start doing a better job of introducing people. I don't do a good job, and I didn't prepare an introduction beyond that for you. But maybe if you could just ground us to kind of your field of expertise, because it's a very unique field, and then we can kind of talk about the books. Yeah.
Well, it started 35 years ago. I actually met a Boston Globe newspaper reporter at a friend's funeral and started talking to her about my idea about starting a business doing intuitive readings. And much to my shock and surprise, she asked for a session with me and she got one. And then she wrote an article and I got over 500 clients in the next month. So that not too many people can claim their business got launched at a funeral, but I'm one of them. Yes. So 35 years I've been doing intuitive readings. People come to me for when they're in the midst of change and transition and trying to figure out next steps. And I use my intuition and hopefully help them use theirs to figure out what's going on, what might be standing in the way, helping them figure out next steps. And then I've written 7 books on the topic, amazingly enough.
Well, you've written 7 books and you're busy. You have been, I've been busy for a long time.
Yeah.
Kind of, touring's not the right word, but you pick up gigs or whatever you want to call it, and you kind of take this message that you've developed to groups big and small, and it's very well received.
Yeah, I'm really passionate about talking to people about their intuition. To me, the dictionary definition is quick and ready insight, which is a little boring, but I think that it's a compass of our soul, that when we're trying to make a decision in life, we're trying to figure out our next steps, our intuition is a guide. It comes in a lot of different ways. Images, feelings, inner voice, dreams, synchronicities, lots of different ways, but it's always there guiding us. So I love writing practical techniques for people because people always say, yeah, you should have trusted your gut, but like, how do you do that? So I like writing about that topic.
Well, and how do you know, right? Because I know sometimes my gut's telling me one thing and I know like some other part of me knows, nope, that is bad advice. Now, other times I'm like, that's good advice. I haven't even thought of it, but there's something back there that like clicks in.
Right. And is it gut feeling or is it the indigestion from the hot dogs you had for dinner? You know, it's like, how do you differentiate those?
It's funny you mentioned that. I've actually learned not to eat hot dogs after 5 p.m. because that's exactly what happens.
Yes. And probably not before you interview one of your writers.
It's true. That's right. So we're going to talk about one of the 7 books called Divine Intuition, Your Inner Guide to Purpose, Peace, and Prosperity.
There it is.
And
nice little cover.
And this is no rinky-dink book. It's a substantial book, but it's also published by John Wiley and Sons. I mean, this is big time stuff.
Yeah. So I wrote it. The first edition of it came out about 15 years ago. So the current one that I just held up was revised just a few years ago. So that was a whole writing process in itself. I actually found it harder to revise the book than to write it in the first place. So that was kind of interesting, trying to update it and think about reworking chapters. That's probably harder if you're doing fiction versus nonfiction, but it was a little tedious.
Nah, fiction's easy because you control everything. So if you make a mistake, you just say, nah, that's that's in the world. That mistake was supposed to happen.
Kill off the character.
But if you give someone bad advice, now you got to live with it forever. So
that's true. You have a point there. Yes. Yeah. So one of the ways that I found that the best advice that I found that at least worked for me, it doesn't always work for everybody else and probably only for fiction, but I found I couldn't start at the beginning and end at the end. I mean, that makes logical sense and maybe I'm a little illogical, but I found that I would be excited about a certain topic and I would okay, I'll write about that. And I didn't really know where it was going to fit into the sequence of the book at first. So I actually found it was easier to also think about them as articles rather than chapters. Sort of helped me, and more kind of writing the book felt very overwhelming. But if I could write an article or a chapter, that it felt a lot easier. I kind of mental self-talk here.
Well, they call that reduction to the ridiculous, which is brilliant. People say, well, how do you deal with writer's block? there's lots of ways to do it. One of the ways is write the next word, right? Which is
Yes.
that's the same thing you said, reduce it to the ridiculous. So write the next
Mhm.
letter, hit the
Right.
space button. Now
Yeah.
work on the next sentence and all of that.
Right.
So I could
And,
see.
in my genre, which is kind of spiritual, nonfiction, self-help, I'm always having colleagues go, well, I just meditated and the chapter arrived. And I'm like, I never had that
Yeah,
experience. I'm sorry. I
yeah.
hate people who say that to me.
Well, I'm sure they're wonderful people, but I wonder if they've really finished any books, right? Because
I know.
yeah,
You got
because
a point there. Yes, I
writing a
know.
book, yeah, starting a book is kind of easy. Writing the book is hard.
Yeah.
Finishing a book is darn near impossible.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes. And I also had to not wait for the muse to hit me. It's like, oh, I feel like writing today.
Yeah.
That rarely happened. Even though I do enjoy the process of writing, I really had to do this, hit the button, the chair, and put your fingers on the keyboard and start writing, to your point. Because if I just waited to want to write, it sort of didn't happen.
Well, let's talk about that exact process, because when this book Divine Intuition came out, you were kind of on a roll. You released a lot of
Yeah.
books over just a couple years.
Right.
What was your process? What did that look like?
Yeah, it really was. I kind of outlined what I wanted to talk about, and then I started with whatever topic felt appealing to me that day. And because a lot of the research that I did for the book was more kind of clients and what people have been experiencing and sharing with me. So I knew what some of the issues or pain points, as they call in marketing and sales, that people had. So I tried to write down what were the pain points, and what advice had I given people, and what did my clients find helpful. So I really try to make it be very practical. There's so often, I think, books like this tend to be a little philosophical, which is all well and good, but it's like, how do you apply this stuff? And that's I feel like my gift. That's what I like to do.
When you did it that way, did you ever find there was one particular part of the book that you kept thinking you were going to address, and then you kept skipping over and it wound
Yes.
up being last? Yeah. What was
Yeah.
that?
Well, it was more like, how does this work? And even though I've been doing this for 35 years, I don't know that I can tell you that. It's like, maybe back to that dictionary definition, but you don't know how you know. Or
Yeah.
as a 15-year-old put it, intuition is like when you know something, but like, where did it come from? So that was the hard part. I really still to this day don't know how to tell you how we come by it. But I do know that when you trust it, it tends to work out.
That's interesting. So what does a person get from reading Divine Intuition?
A lot of times people come to me when as I said, when they're in the midst of change and transition, and who isn't at this point in our lives, between pandemic and
Right.
economy and everything else. So, a lot of it is practical information about how do you make a good decision? How do you make a life change? I'm really interested in, I guess, what's now called law of attraction, how to focus on what you want and, be clear about that. And I think intuition is one of the missing pieces that we can define what we want. But intuition, I believe, is a guide for how to get there, how to listen to it. It gives us guidance along the path. So that's a lot of what people get out of the book. I love helping people when they're wanting something new in their life, when they're wanting some change, when they're wanting something, they know inside that they want to have a change.
Yeah.
And how do you get there? Because most of us get scared when we do something new. It's scary to change. I'm sure it was a little scary to write your first book or do your first podcast.
Well, the reviews were scary. I'll admit that. So
other people were scared.
Other people, yeah, scared other people. So look, I'm not studied on the topic, but I'm aware of the law of attraction, and I do believe it, if that makes sense. But it's
Sort of.
not. It's like if you're a batter and you're up against a good pitcher,
Mhm.
not every pitch is going to be in the strike zone. So
Right.
you can't just sit there and decide now's the time. Law of attraction. I want a
Right.
new BMW.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's
I
not
know.
how it
And the
works. Yeah.
BMW doesn't show up the next day. I know. And to me, but what I find, David, is a lot of people focus on what they don't want versus what they do
Yeah.
want.
Yeah.
And,
Yes.
and so I think it certainly gives you a better than average, batter's average, I guess, to be focused on what you do want and be defining that. And I think we all get a lot of that negative self-talk. Of the ones I hear most commonly are, I'd like to do X, but I don't have the confidence, or I'm not smart enough, or I'm too old or too young, or, fill in the blank. And so I think when we often stop ourselves, how am I going to get that BMW? That's not going to happen for me. So it is it's a little more complex than just focus on what you want and it shows up.
I know. I think that's very much true. And the whole ability to shift from thinking of the negative to thinking of the positive, which I have to a large degree. I've done that over the
Yeah.
past 5 years, and it's
Hmm.
hard. It's a lot of work.
It
So
is.
I think you need three things. You need good intuition, or whatever we're calling this law of attraction thing. You need a
Hmm.
lot of luck,
Hmm.
because there's a lot of great, bright, smart, brilliant people doing
Hmm.
wonderful things. But they just don't have the luck, and they need a
Right.
lot of hustle, right?
Yeah.
And
Yep.
if you're lucky and you hustle, then this other positive way of thinking does seem to yield. And it's not
Yes.
always the thing, it's not everything you think you want, but it turns out to be the things that you, I hate to
Mm.
use this cliche, need, or whatever word you want
Yeah.
to use,
It's like that Rolling Stone song. You don't always get what you want,
Yeah.
but
And
sometimes you get what you need.
sometimes you get what you need. It doesn't always
Yeah.
work. It's not 100%. Like I
Hmm.
watched the movie The Secret a long time ago. And
Mm.
there was a guy, I just visualize a parking spot at the mall when I go, and I always get it. I'm like, yeah, no.
Yeah. No, I don't either.
Yeah, that's good. But so how did you turn all of this into a book? It seems like, just like you said, this is one thing to talk about it, but to actually write it down seems
Mhm.
seems daunting.
Yeah. Well, actually, it was part of my visualization, believe it or not. I really
Yeah.
did want to write a book. And so I did kind of, I did think about it, visualize it, take action steps based on it. Imagined the book in the bookstore. So I did all of that stuff. It's interesting. When this book, Divine Intuition, came out, I got invited to be on Anderson Cooper's show, my
Wow.
idol, for his daytime talk show. And for some reason, got to be the expert on luck, which I don't really consider myself an expert on. But you go with what you got,
Yeah.
So I said yes. But it was interesting. So I kind of had to do a little cram course on what makes people lucky. And interestingly, people who are lucky tell themselves they're lucky. I'm a lucky person. Those good things happen to me.
Mm.
And they also trust their intuition. And to your point, they also talk to people, take action on any of their, impulses to go in the right direction. So it was an interesting combination, but intuition and telling yourself you're lucky were big components to it.
You mentioned visualization. Go into that a little bit more. I actually use
Mm.
that. I'm familiar with that. I hear like a lot of the top athletes will use that, and I really very much
Yes.
do use it.
Yeah.
But
I
what
think
is
that too.
visualization?
Yeah.
Visualization for
So
those who don't know. Yeah.
what I do is kind of figure out what is it that I want, not how am I going to get there, but what's the end result that I want. And I just, a couple minutes a day, I don't spend half an hour doing this or anything. So I just close my eyes, center myself, and I imagine, the book in the bookstore, the book doing
Yeah.
well, speaking to large numbers of people. I talk to myself in my mind as if I have what I want. Like, oh, I'm so grateful that book is out there, and then, wow, it's going up on the charts, and my publisher's happy. So I'll just visualize those things. And I don't know. I just have found over and over. I mean, I figure if I can make a living at this, anybody can make a living at anything. But I just am really grateful, and I think I can't prove this, but I do think that visualization, positive self-talk, imagining myself as being lucky are probably all key components there.
I think it works. I think it works. It's hard. It doesn't work the way you expect it to work.
No,
Um,
no, you're right.
but it does. Because I do it. And I now do it, and I don't even have to go through that process. I'm
Right.
constantly thinking. I'll tell people, like I mentioned, how hard it is to finish a book. They're like, well, how do I write a book? I'm like, I don't know how you write it, but just imagine how great it's going to be to have written it.
Yes.
It's the
Oh,
same,
good.
right?
Right.
And so
Yeah.
shoot for that feeling. Shoot for that feeling of
Yes.
having written it.
And you just said a key point, because I think a lot of it is feeling. It's not just seeing it, but it's feeling it. What
Yeah.
does that feel like? What does it feel like to have an ideal day, or have
Yeah.
that book finished, or be in that relationship that you are, or to have the BMW in your driveway?
Yeah. I know how that
Yeah.
feels, which is just a big bill every month. So
Oh yeah, there's that.
All right.
You have
Well,
to visualize the bill with paid across it.
yeah, I'll just send in a
Yeah.
blank. I'll send in an unsigned check, and I'll say, just visualize it was signed. Yeah.
Yeah, good.
All right. So you've been doing this now for a while. The books have been out for a while. Is there anything that has surprised you over time? Has the reception of this type of stuff changed,
Yeah.
and good or bad? Maybe something bad happened. Good, but any
Yeah.
big surprises since you've been doing this?
I do find that people are accepting the idea of intuition a lot more. And partly because I think because everything's changed so much in the last few years that
Yeah.
we can't go forward necessarily all based on facts and, rational decisions. We really do have to kind of be on the leading edge a little bit and think inspirationally and creatively. And I think intuition is a guide for that. I'm also finding a lot of businesses being much more, or business people being a lot more open to this. I'm getting hired a lot more by entrepreneurs, C-level executives to be, using intuition and going, what's going on with my team? How can I motivate people? Is this a good decision? What do you get about this meeting? So that's kind of fascinating to me. I think, coaching was, something really new 10 or 15 years ago. And I think that kind of trusting intuition and having an intuitive, whatever I call myself, advisor on team is going to be something that's happening in the future.
That's interesting. It's almost the Diana Troy from Star Trek.
Yes, I use that example a lot.
Do you really?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Right. Yeah. And by the way, when I was in the corporate world, I got promoted. I came home. I said, "Hey," I told my wife, "Hey, I'm a C-level executive now." She's like, "I think you're at least B-level." So I said, "No, let me explain the whole thing."
Okay, it was a vote of confidence there.
It's like, why do you say A if that's what you thought the scale was? What the hell is this B thing? But,
I know.
All right. So, Lynn, what advice would you have? I know your whole, you spend a lot of time giving advice, but specifically for someone who maybe felt like they had a book, like, I don't want to call it, I almost called it self-help, and that would have been a grievous error on my part. But a book like this where you're laying out ideas that people can use that maybe aren't mainstream. What advice might you have for someone who thought they had a book like this in them, where they knew about it, and they wanted to get that out there?
I'm really a big believer in small steps. I mean, sometimes it is hard to get from I haven't written a book to wow, I've written one and it's successful. I mean, there's a big wide range.
There's a big step.
But I just, I'm a really big believer in taking small steps. Start writing it. Write the outline. Go to writers groups. Listen to podcasts like this. Talk to other people who are writers. Go to writers conferences. Talk to the editors and the agents. I mean, that's just. I always find that when I take small steps, put myself out there in the direction that I want to go in, that's when the miracles, the synchronicities, the coincidences, the BMWs in your driveway start showing up.
You got to do stuff, right? You have to, you can't just sit, you can't be static, because then whatever this is doesn't have the chance to do anything for you.
Yeah.
So you got to.
The example I like to use, it's like intuition is like your inner GPS, and like the GPS in your car, your phone, it doesn't usually start giving you direction until you put the foot on the accelerator and start moving.
You got to move.
So so I think to your point, you've got to start putting the energy out there, starting to move.
That's good.
Exactly.
Yeah. And so just to paraphrase your advice is, if someone thinks they want to write a book, write the damn book.
Isn't it? I know. Gosh, that sounds so simple. Next.
All right. Well, Lynn, it's been great talking to you. We can talk later, follow up one of your other books, or maybe in a couple months we can just catch up and see what's going on.
Terrific. Okay. Thanks. You. It's been fun talking to you. Bye-bye.
Thank you for watching. Please consider hitting the subscribe button.